Welcome to the Pigskin Party Podcast, the only podcast that combines real NFL analysis with a splash of pop culture and a dash of the random. Let's get this Pigskin Party started with your hosts, Brian McFadden and Will Southard.
Welcome, everybody, to the PPP. My name is Brian. Please, as always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening or watching. And don't forget to tell that friend, because that's how we grow this Pigskin Party. Joining me, just like every single week, for another breakdown of the news, and there is some pretty hefty news to talk about today, Mr. Will Southard. How you doing?
What's going on, buddy? I'm doing pretty good. It's a week of fun NFL speculation, of fun, jersey sales. We got a lot of potential moves. We got it's just a good time, man. We got
jersey sales. I really didn't want to mention this, but you know who was number one in jersey sales last week, right?
For 5 different teams now. The number one jersey for 5. What a monster. What a monster. Anyway.
Okay, we don't have to say his name. It's implied.
I didn't. Did I?
Okay, good.
I didn't.
No, it didn't. See, because here's the thing. I actually threw out my back this weekend. I'm glad that I was able to recover. I'm not 100%, but I recovered enough in time to do this show. And I think if you mention his name, it would throw my back again, and the whole show would be done. Tommy'd have to step in and host, and Anthony, it would just be.
You need to tell that little feisty wife of yours to slow down.
Hey, anything I can get at 40,
You're
I'm
like
gonna
40,
take.
bro.
I'm not going to complain.
2 strokes, your back's done.
Not like 40. I am
in
40.
golf, obviously.
And I'm ashamed to say that it was like doing the laundry. There was no cool story behind it. So, speaking of golf, before we get to our guests, we do have a special occasion today, and that is our producer, Anthony Wayner. It's his birthday! Congratulations, happy birthday. Are you legally able to drink yet?
I've been legally to drink for 4 years now, so that's not a problem.
Do the math, 21, 25. Okay, there you go. Only 15 years younger than me. What'd you do for your birthday, dude?
I went golfing. I hit 18 holes at DeBell and here in Burbank. I did good. I did really good. I hit really well. I'm really happy about it.
Use a little of that birthday luck to play well.
Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, I guess so.
All right,
that and some beer,
We're going to let you, as a birthday present, we're going to let you stay on the show. We still want you to produce because that's what you do, but we're actually going to let you stay on and throw in some comments, and we might have a special Anthony segment coming on. So happy birthday, Anthony Wayner, 25 whole years old. He's still a baby. We're going to let him stay on. Let's go ahead and jump into bringing our guests. We do have 2 guests today, so with Anthony staying on, we're going to have quite the full house. Our first guest from the Locked On Titans podcast, Tyler Rowland, true Titans fan. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that he is no shortage of Titans memorabilia. Tyler, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. The NFL is a 12-month sport at this point, so there's always big news to break down, and when the Titans are related, it doesn't get much better than that. So excited for you guys to have me on here, and excited to chop it up and talk some ball.
Well,
when the
they
schedule
are from Tennessee.
release,
most people in Tennessee are related.
It begins early. When the schedule release becomes like a holiday in the NFL and there's like leaks left and right, then that's when you know the NFL is a 365-day-a-year business. And you know what? We run an NFL podcast, so we're not going to complain about that. Let's go ahead and bring in our second guest, our returning champion for the week, host of the You Dive Deep podcast. Welcome back, Mr. Tommy Yu.
I am so happy to be here right now because last time I was here, you guys trapped me. You guys knew I was an Eagles fan, so you're like, let's talk about the Cowboys. And I was like, how dare you? And so now that I'm back, we're talking about a team I'm actually really fond of, and Tyler, so far, from the small conversations we've had, he's awesome. So, hey, thank you for having me back and not trapping me again, unless you switch to show doc and be like, let's talk about the Washington football team. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, here we go.
Here's the thing,
It is early, Tommy. You don't know what we're going to pull, so don't jump the gun.
The news that we're going to talk about literally shats on the Cowboys. So there's that.
I love it. You guys do a fantastic job. It's almost like I'm doing my encore tour. Be like, thanks for dealing with the Cowboys. Let's just lay the table. So I'm just excited to hear.
I am confused about your shirt, though. Are you actually just going to wear that for like
you had to call it out. This was a podcast. I didn't think people were... Well, for those of you who don't know, I'm wearing a Pennsylvania shirt. And full disclosure, I'm working remotely right now. Yeah, I'm working remotely right now, so I'm almost always in my PJs, and the way I rotate my PJs, and I just find shirts that are too big for me, and I'm embarrassed to wear in public. And hey, this fit the bill perfectly, so that's kind of where I'm wearing it now. But also, I am hoping Wentz does well over at Indianapolis, but obviously I'm a little bit ashamed of how that tenure went Eagles. But hey, this is not an Eagles podcast. Just happy to be here, guys.
So, I mean, what's the shirt like? Is it the Windy-Annapolis? Wintanapolis? You can't do the same thing.
Yeah,
Pennsylvania?
yeah.
Like, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I have no idea what they're going to come up with, but hey, maybe they won't need to if he doesn't pan out, so who knows, right?
So
Let's
if you
hope
wanna,
he does not pan out.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, from the Titans fan. So if you want to see the shirt that Tommy is embarrassed to wear in public, but is more than happy to wear on our show, check out our YouTube. One more incentive is I actually, for the first time, have a green screen behind me. Now, I am giving carte blanche to Anthony. I have no idea what he's going to put behind there. I trust Anthony more than Will. There's no way I would ever, in a million years, let Will put random stuff
He's putting
behind
his
me.
birthday Wiener behind you.
You know what? If it looks cool and gets us
Yeah,
some
I tuned in,
additional
not gonna
viewers and
lie.
listeners,
wouldn't.
then it'll be worth it. So let's go ahead. We are as since we have Tyler on, I'm sure you've guessed if you listened to the show before that we're going to continue our weekly team deep dive series. This week we are going deep on the Tennessee Titans, and we do have some news. Will alluded to it, but before we do any of that, as I teased before, it is Anthony's birthday. We actually have him on. So I'm going to turn it over to him first for a little segment I like to call Anthony's Angle.
So today I decided to talk about how hard it is to be a Detroit Lions fan. It's hard. It's tough. It's like being a fan of any
First
team
of
in
all,
the NFC
Anthony,
East.
before you get into your rant, why do you not have a sound drop for your Anthony's Angle? I was expecting something to hit.
I can add one right now. Here we
His
go.
angles. That was just a random
thunder.
sound.
It's
That wasn't
thunder.
even anything.
It's a
You just-
thunder. It's the
You
depressing...
literally went to Google and hit sound effect and just played the first thing that came
I
up.
wish that was that easy.
No, it's the depression in his mind at what he's about to tell us and the inevitability of him being a Rams fan. Go ahead, Anthony.
The inevitability. I don't know. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Stafford. I always have been. When he came to LA, so actually it's a funny story because like 4 weeks before the trade happened, Tyler and I were talking. My brother Tyler and I, we're like, where's Stafford gonna go? I thought he was gonna go to the Colts or Washington, and I'm like, I really would love him to come to LA. Since I'm here, I've always liked the Rams. Like that, knowing that he was already gonna leave Detroit, it was inevitable already. So I'm like, I just want him to come to the Rams. That way, I could have some kind of closeness still. And then 4 weeks later, I was actually at a bar, and my phone rang. I'm like, oh, what's this? And it said Stafford being traded to the Rams, and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, no way. And then I got a phone call from my brother, and he's like, hey, did you see that? I'm like, yeah, I saw that. And it was so exciting.
So you willed it into existence.
Yes. Exactly,
You have that kind of power.
Because I read
I'm
this
impressed.
article from a writer who said they were number 7 on the list of teams that Stafford was going to go to. So my hopes were gone. I'm like, there's no way he's going to go to the Rams. I'm like, this is done. Like, my hope's done. Like, he's going to go to the Colts or something. Like, and he went to the Rams, and I was happy just because that's the second team that I would root for. I'm never going to leave my Lions, ever. So you're
Allegedly.
allegedly. What's really cool about it too is the Lions play at 10 a.m. The Rams play at 1 p.m. I'm gonna have 2 teams to watch every week. You know how fun that's gonna be. I'm excited. Like that's gonna be cool. And then when they play Week 7, I'm gonna be at the game. I still don't know what jersey I'm gonna wear. A Stafford Rams jersey would be kind of ironic.
2 teams,
but
1 winner.
Detroit-
Well, his brother will be there too, so there'll be 2 Wainers.
You can never have enough Wainers, really, if you think about it.
But I want to see Jared Goff, show what he's capable of. Like, I want us to give him a chance. He has been to a Super Bowl, but he had a defense to ride on. And in Detroit, there's no such thing as defense. Stafford
Not
was
to
chasing
mention no one
points
to
for
throw to
decades.
outside of Hawkinson.
Is this part of your story about why you're sad to be a Lions fan?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Because no one's ever successful. And it's organizational all the way. Barry Sanders left because he asked for something and they wouldn't give it to him. Calvin Johnson left because he asked for something and they wouldn't give it to him. Stafford left because he asked for something and they wouldn't give it to him. And it's one of those things where if you want to make your best player happy, you need to give him what he asks for, or they're going to leave. And that's exactly what happened. It's happened for the fourth time now in a few decades, and it pisses me off because there's all these organizations being really successful because they're listening to their star players, and Stafford was their star player, and they wouldn't listen to him.
I'm pretty sure if you took all those names that you just mentioned and put them on the same offense, you still wouldn't win in Detroit.
I disagree. Well, okay, so if you put them on the same offense, but then also improved the defense, we'd be winning Super Bowls.
If you got a new team but kept the same name, you might win. That would be accurate. That's 100%.
Well, Anthony, I like Dan Campbell. I think the arrow is certainly pointing up. I don't think Jared Goff will be anything there, especially with no actual weapons short of Hawkinson. I do think they'll have a decent running game with Swift, but yeah, they're not going to be good. The Rams are going to go to the Super Bowl, and this time next year, you're going to be talking about how, you know what, I think I'm coming around to LA, and I think I'm going to be a Rams fan, so just accept it.
Anthony, I just want to say this. From a distance, I don't cover the Lions. I'm just meeting you for the first time, so I have no interest in crapping on your dreams either, but... Can I say that I think the Detroit Lions will be a surprise team this year? I think they're going to end up 6-11, 7-10. So my big reason for that is the offensive line. I think they have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL now with the addition of Penei Sewell. You have the center in Glasgow. You have Taylor Decker on the other side. And I think that the importance of the offensive line was highlighted in the Super Bowl. And I think the Lions have a decent offensive line. So while the rest of the cast of the characters is very unreliable, I'm sorry, but the offensive line is good. And I think that at minimum, it'll produce a more exciting football than maybe you're expecting going into the season. So have hope. Have hope on your birthday.
I always have hope, yeah. And it makes my blood boil because if we had that kind of offensive line with Matthew Stafford under center, we would have seen success. I mean, he was scoring 21-plus points every game last season, but the defense couldn't hold up. He was getting sad. He played with broken ribs almost every game. He had a broken back because he was carrying the damn team on it. And, I mean, it's like you give Goff this offensive line that you should have given Stafford, and Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn are to blame.
I still think, and I completely agree with Tyler about the strength of that offensive line. And here's the teaser for the flavor of the week. We're actually going to be discussing fantasy football for the first time in, I guess, a couple months to preview the season. And there are some Lions players who make some list of I think might make a jump. Yeah, you can make all the faces you want, Will, but here's what I'm going to say. I think it's the run game. I think that's going to be an old school with Anthony Lynn running the offense, with DeAndre Swift ready to make continue his jump into his second year. I think that's going to be – and Dan Campbell as head coach, smash mouth, run the ball, not exciting, but
that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the – like, think about the franchise, bro. Like, all these teams getting new logos, new colors. The Lions' colors just don't go together in 2021, right? Like, just from a branding perspective, like, what are you even doing? You know what I mean? Like, refresh that, bro. You gotta
In
classic.
their defense,
that's classic.
The last decade, they changed their uniform and they
too.
added to the logo. I mean, they've made some changes.
Silver and blue, like
It's
really?
classic.
Honolulu blue.
How can you ask you? We're purists here, man. We're an NFL podcast. We gotta love the Detroit Lions.
The Dolphins have changed their logo like 5 times in the past,
and
decade.
they shouldn't have. I miss the old Dolphin.
Yeah,
personally. All right, but let's not get on a tangent. Anthony, thank you for your angle on why you're sad with the current state of affairs in the Lions, and why you will eventually be a Rams fan because it's just going to be too exciting to watch your boy Stafford in LA taking his team on an MVP level. Into the Super Bowl.
Leave it to the Lions.
It's going to be depressing.
Leave it to the Lions to draft a lineman who's from Samoa and has the first name of Pasta. It's just a weird combination.
Is that a Samoan for pasta? Or you mean penny pasta?
Oh, penny.
Took me a second to get that. All right, so before this thing goes even further off the rails, let's keep it moving. So there really is only one newsworthy item to discuss today, but it is quite a... There you go with the segue. You got to get quicker on that. You say it when I'm like halfway between my...
I had to remember what key I had to press.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll get it.
Remember,
I'll get it.
Label them or something, Mr. Producer.
All
right. Oh, he's got his note cards. Good. So yeah, it was. I actually created these show notes towards the end of last week. So this was already the main point I wanted to discuss. And then some big news broke this morning that just made this all the more prescient. So let's jump into it. Julio Jones. So the Falcons, as it stands right now, cannot sign their 2021 draft class. They currently have about a whole $600,000 in cap space, and the rookie class themselves, nice, is going to take up about $13 million. So these are all the notes they had written about, some of the financial aspects if they trade Julio after June 1st, what GM Terry Fontenot is discussing. But what I want to start with is what broke this morning. So Shannon Sharpe was on TV with, who is it?
Skip Bayless.
Skip Bayless, yeah. And he decides to let's just call Julio. So Shannon calls Julio Jones live on the air, did not appear to know he was live, and just has a casual conversation because apparently Julio was spotted in a Cowboys shirt. And he straight up, a couple things we learned from the call is that he said, yeah, he's out of there, I think was the quote. He's leaving Atlanta. Mm-hmm. He does not want to go to Dallas. And he wants to go to a winner. So that's what came up. Will, I'll start with you on this one because you mentioned something about Dallas. So what were your thoughts when you saw this? And then we'll talk about some of the repercussions.
I mean, dude, if I'm Julio, I'm gonna be kind of pissed, right? He didn't say anything too bad, but at the same time, your boy calls you, who you think is your boy, and maybe he should know better. He should know Shannon Sharpe got him on speakerphone. I don't know. That was a weird situation. I feel like that might have been a little manufactured, maybe. But
well, apparently there's longer clips that clearly show that he did not know he was on air. And I think Tommy mentioned to me beforehand that the producers were trying to say to Shannon, hey, tell him he's live, tell him he's on air, and Shannon didn't do that, I think, until towards the end. So now we don't know. Maybe the whole thing really was manufactured, but it actually seemed like they kind of sprung it on him.
I mean, yeah, and here's the thing, right? Is what did he really say? I'm out of there. That, you could say, right, from an NFL perspective, why is that bad, right? Well, number one, it undercuts the Falcons' position a little bit, right? If you're convinced you're gonna leave, and teams know that you're gonna get dealt, they're not gonna get the first round pick. That, you know what I mean? I think it hurts the Falcons' position a little bit, not very much, because I don't think it was any secret that he's gonna get traded. He has to get traded, but.
Counterpoint on that. Can I say that I agree with you, and that's conventional wisdom, but what if
that's not a counterpoint?
What if it has the opposite effect? What if it's some teams were I'm not going to go in there and throw my best punch. They're not going to deal this guy. I'm not going to overplay my hand. But now it's wait a minute. He's on live TV saying I'm out of there. I might have to go in there and offer my best offer because he is going to get dealt, and I got to get him. So maybe. I've been having this conversation in my head. I don't know what's right or wwhat's wrong, but I guess I could see it both ways at this moment in time. It could help or hurt the Falcons depending on which way that actually goes. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't believe he has a no trade clause, right? So he's going to go somewhere, and that's wherever they're going to pay. So if he's going to wind up with Jerry Jones, but I don't think that's the case. I think
he straight up said it's not Dallas.
Well, how does he know?
Does he know? Or is it,
I guess that's
the
true.
Trade already
because he wants to win.
Yeah, but and to Will's point, he can't control that. This isn't like the Russell Wilson situation, Deshaun Watson prior to all the allegations, where they have no trade clauses and they can effectively choose their destination.
Imagine working your whole life, right? And you're I'm the 1% who's going to make it to the NFL, right? And on draft day, the biggest moment of your life, let's say you're from South Florida, right? You went to Chaminade, right? And you
just pulled that high school out of nowhere.
Say that's what happened, and you get drafted, and you have to move from Miami to friggin' Detroit. It sucks, right? But that's the reality of being an NFL player. Is you're gonna go wherever, but there are a number of fun destinations we can pick Julio to go to with some players in the market. So I'm excited
and
for
we'll
you
get
guys
to that.
do that.
I want to circle back around and start talking about possible destinations, but I want to hear Tommy's thought on the short idea of Cowboys fans thinking there was a shot they got Julio Jones just for at least for him to say, nope, I'm not going to Dallas?
Oh, no, I personally would have loved if Julio Jones went over to the Cowboys because they are going to be facing some cap hell, like, regardless if Julio is there or not. The fact that, like, half of their offensive linemen are, like, one of the most highly paid in their spot. You're paying Zeke a lot of money. Amari Cooper's making a pretty penny. I know CeeDee Lamb is still really, really young, but eventually he's going to demand a big contract. But, like, if Julio went there, I would have been so happy, only because I feel like Dak... I personally like Dak even as an Eagles fan, but like I feel like if you have someone like Julio Jones there, you can't not feed him the ball, and then you have someone like CeeDee Lamb who has like that alpha mentality, being like, yo, wait, why aren't I getting the ball? Amari Cooper is a phenomenal guy, being like, wait, how about me? And now Zeke's like, yo, we should run the ball more. Oh, it would have been a beautiful dumpster
They don't
fire.
need him though. So like
That's
one,
what I'm saying.
They don't
need him. But if they got him, and like these Cowboys fans are like, oh, how great would it have been? I'm like, bro, why? Like.
But, I mean,
did you see your team last year? The last thing you needed was more offense. Well, minus Dak going down. But, like, even with that going down, the offense was still more serviceable than the crappy Eagles and what we were putting out. But my whole thing with Atlanta, before this whole Shannon Sharp on the Skip Bayless, whatever, before that happened, I kind of sat down and started to think, well, A, let's figure out why they need to trade them. And kind of like what you said, Brian, they're kind of in some cap trouble. They can't even sign their rookie class. And so I started to look back at what they had and some of the research that I saw. And here, I'll just make this real quick. In 2021, if they were to trade him after, what is it, like,
June 1st.
June? I think June 1st. You have to wait until June 1st, and that's when the first domino will fall to see if anything kind of happens, kind of the way that his contract looks like. Their cap saving would be a grand $15.3 million. That's huge. But then there's also $7.75 million in dead cap. And then next year, the cap hit would have been, or the cap saving for 2022 is $3.7 million with over $15.5 million dead cap. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because 2022 is also when Calvin Ridley's fifth-year option would go into effect, which is a little bit over $11 million. And the reason I'm bringing this whole thing up is because it's a long-winded way of saying in 2022, it would cost Atlanta around $26.6 million just for Calvin Ridley alone. But then it would cost around a little over $30 million. So about $4 million more dollars to keep both Ridley and Julio. So this is just my long-winded way of saying they're kind of all in with Matt Ryan right now. They didn't draft a quarterback. They're going to play it out, and I think Matt Ryan can still get it done. And
they went out his contract.
Exactly. And then they got Kyle Pitts, who everyone was saying was BPA and stuff like that, which, you know, you could agree with, not agree. It does not matter. It happened. And so now I'm saying, well, now look at this team and take Julio off of it. That obviously means the team is worse, but they still have to find this cap relief. So I feel like there are other ways that they can get this done. Like, that amazing defensive tackle, Jarrett Grady, or whatever his name is. I know restructuring it probably won't help him too much, but if they actually offer him an extension, you're able to play around with the cap where they would be able to get under to be able to sign their rookie class. But this is, everything I'm saying could be thrown out the window, because after I heard what happened with the Shannon Sharp thing, I was like, oh, okay, everything I said is now a lie. And the only reason I say that is because I feel like Atlanta still wants to keep him, but if Julio already has the mindset being like, nah, I'm mentally checking out of Atlanta now. I mean, can you still reconcile that? Maybe you can, but for me, I feel like that's all I needed to hear.
Here's a question I have, and this is unrelated to the Julio thing, but what happens if you actually can't sign a draft pick from a cap situation? Has that ever happened?
Oh, they just go to the Eagles and play for free. I think that's in the rules.
Because when you draft somebody, you own their rights for a year, right? So, like, is that like cutting somebody? I don't wonder if that ever actually has happened, but
they would but they would, depending on who it is. I mean, you're not going to let Kyle Pitts sit. You're going to cut other players on your team.
Kyle Pitts, but you know, like some nobody draft pick. Anyway, I think the person that we should hear from on this is the person most likely to get Julio. I think, which is Tyler.
Well, the odds
you think the Titans have a chance? Okay,
changed today, and a lot of sports books right now have moved the Titans to the favorite at plus 175, even ahead of the Atlanta Falcons at plus 250. So, excitingly enough, I can't lie, I did not expect all of this to happen today, but it is very good news. And with,
not for AJ
I don't
Brown.
know if you guys have been well, I think it's great news for AJ Brown, quite frankly, because right now with the way things are set up, there's going to be so much double coverage, so much rolled coverage over his direction that I think while we all talked about the massive amount of targets that he would get. I think it would actually be beneficial to A.J. Brown to get maybe a little bit less targets, but they'll be more efficient if he has more room out on the field with a guy like Julio Jones across from him as compared to Josh Reynolds, Nick Westbrook-Akina, or a long list of guys that you guys have probably never heard of. So
was that the guy that used to play for the Rams? That Josh Reynolds?
Josh Reynolds, yes. And I think Josh Reynolds is a better player than people think he is. He was behind Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, and Cooper Kupp for a lot of his career. He had over 500 yards last year when he got even a decent opportunity as wide receiver 3. I think he's a solid guy, but he's not Julio Jones, even an older Julio Jones. So I do think while it would take targets away from A.J. Brown and everybody's kind of salivating at what his target share could be this year, I still think that having a solid weapon on the other side is what truly unlocks his potential. So I think it would be a great fit for the Titans. And right now, based on the odds, I don't know if you guys have been seeing, Julio Jones has been working out with Derrick Henry. All during the off season, they've been posting pictures together, workout
dude, I
videos
saw
together.
Julio doing the sexy rope thing, and I was like, oh, that's all I need to see. Julio Jones got it.
Derrick Henry is not the type of guy to go on social media and like say a lot. You know, a lot of his stuff is very pared down. But there was like a Bleacher Report tweet that had the odds of who could get Julio before this happened last week. And Derrick Henry retweeted it and was endorsing the deal. So for him to come out publicly and you know, say he wants it to happen, be working out with him nonstop throughout the offseason with the same trainer, and now all of this, I don't know, it's kind of one of those things that reminds me of last year with Jadeveon Clowney, where it's like everybody knew Clowney was going to go to the Titans, but he just didn't want to go to training camp. And it's almost like a lot of people know that Julio's going to go to the Titans, but they can't execute the trade until after June 1st for the financial reasons that Tommy highlighted earlier. So it's almost like one of those things where I don't want to get myself too excited, but it feels like Clowney in the sense is it's something that's going to happen. It makes all the sense in the world. So obviously we'll talk more about it, but that's kind of my initial push and my initial argument.
It's going to be an electric first or second down. For sure. Third down, we all know he's not going to be on the field because he never is.
So let's talk a little bit about Julio, and then I want to come back to you, Tyler, actually, with what possible compensation could be offered from Tennessee or any other team. So Julio Jones is 32 years old. He is the Falcons' all-time leading receiver. 848 catches, nearly 13,000 yards, and 60 touchdowns. Just turned 32, so he'll be 32 throughout the season. But he did not have 1,000 yards last year. It was his first time since 2013 he did not have 1,000 yards. He's had some injury issues lately. Will jokes, but it's true. He for some reason, was not really on in a lot of third downs. You got a 32-year-old receiver with injury problems. He's still Julio, but what do you offer for someone like that? Especially now, as you mentioned, yes, certain teams... former Julio. But certain teams, might have been on the fence.
His name's Quintorris.
Oh, that's right. We had the real NFL name. Quintorris. What would Tennessee offer or another team for Quintorris, knowing what they know now?
I think to start off, kind of put a baseline of what kind of compensation that the Falcons would be looking for. I want to reference an Adam Schefter tweet from this morning when the firestorm was kind of happening. And he said, Atlanta has asked teams that have inquired about Julio Jones for a first-round draft pick in return per sources. Others around the league don't believe the Falcons ultimately will get a first for the perennial Pro Bowl wide receiver. So while this is Julio Jones, a Hall of Fame wide receiver, he is, as you mentioned, 32 years old. Natural decline is going to come. He missed, 7 games last year, only played in 9. So there's those concerns. I think it's very affordable. The contract that you would inherit from Julio Jones, which would be $15.3 million this season, and then $11.5 million in the next 2 seasons after that. So you're at about, it's about $36 million over the next 3 years. But the cap is going to spike soon because we're going to get back to normal in terms of fans in the stands. Also, new TV deal was signed over the offseason. That's going to kick in 2023, I do believe. So the cap is going to go up from the 191 or 183 right now because of COVID. It's going to go up to 200, 220, 250 in a flash. So those are financial risks I think that are worth taking. But Schefter even says others around the league don't think the Falcons are going to get a first-round pick. I don't either because of those concerns about Julio, regardless of what his career accolades are. So to me, a second-round pick in the 2022 draft, which worth mentioning, 2022 draft picks are going to be valued much more highly than draft picks in recent future because we're going to have a normal offseason, a normal pre-draft season, which will allow teams to get more medical info they've got the last 2 seasons, allow them to get more player intel than they've got the last 2 seasons, hands-on work with players more than the last 2 seasons. So teams are going to want these 2022 picks, and I think a second-round 2022 pick is the absolute starter for any package for Julio Jones, and it's all about what teams are willing to offer outside of that in terms of will they want a cheap player? Will they want, additional draft compensation? We start with a 2022 second-round pick, in my opinion, and then go from there. As for the Titans, go ahead, Will.
Just a counterpoint real quick. We've seen trades go off for way more ridiculous prices. We're talking about Julio Jones. Right? And we're talking about Aaron Rodgers. We're talking about 3 first-round picks, right? And that's a different situation a little bit. But, we're talking about somebody in the back end of their career and this and that, whatever. When you think about the impact of first-round draft picks, especially like where the Titans' first-round draft pick would be, which is in the back half of that draft, right? Like, I don't know where that's going to be, but it's going to be in the back third somewhere. That's not that much. Like, if it's my team and I'm on the cusp of really competing, which is what the Titans are doing, I'm giving up a first-round pick for Julio Jones. Not more than that, but I'm giving up a first-round pick for Julio Jones all day long. Assuming that he's in really good shape, all that kind of stuff, and he comes in. Mm-hmm. Rest him, use him when you need him. Like, don't burn him out in game 1 through 4, but that doesn't seem that high of a price to me. 1 first-round pick?
I appreciate that. I think that there are a lot of Titans fans who agree with you, and that's the conversation. I'm saying the baseline is a 2022 second-round pick. Well, the question then becomes, if there are a bunch of teams and maybe a team that will have a projected lower pick or whatever, if there are teams offering a second and a third, the Titans only want to do a second and a fourth, would John Robinson and the Titans, with what their wide receiver position be right now, would they be willing to go ahead and do that? Okay, we'll do the first. The Titans have been picking 20 or later, 19 or later for multiple years now. Would they say, hey, we got Josh Reynolds at wide receiver 2, Derrick Henry, how long is he going to be viable when we're giving him 1 million carries a year? We're in the Super Bowl window with A.J. Brown on the rookie contract now. We need to go do it. From your guys' perspective, Brian, start with you, I guess. Do you think it would be worth the Titans to just come in with the trump card and pay the first-round pick, even if other teams aren't willing to go that far?
I do appreciate you taking over the hosting job for Brian, and you're like, Brian, you're up, buddy.
I'm sorry.
Nobody ever asked me questions.
I do a show by myself.
I like it.
I love it.
It's just so natural for conversation.
Yeah.
I do a show all by myself.
You're
all
so
the time.
much better than Brian. You can stay. Brian's fired.
No.
I actually
He's much more
appreciate it because
experienced.
nobody ever asked me questions. I'm always the one asking the questions. So thank you, Tyler. Will, shut up. It's all about how close they think they really are. And we're going to get into this a little bit in the Titans deep dive, but we'll address it now. I actually think, and I like Ryan Tannehill. I'm a Dolphins fan. I loved seeing him flourish after getting out of the Gase effect. But I'm worried about Tennessee this year. I think there will be some regression, losing Arthur Smith as their play caller, losing a lot of their weapons, and maybe a guy like Julio. Obviously, you'd rather have him than Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith, right? But I'm worried that eventually Henry is not going to be as resilient because the amount of carries he gets. So that's my concern. But if you as an organization really feel, you've had very strong playoff runs 2 years in a row. Obviously, nearly made it to the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago, and you think just another if Julio can be Julio, that kind of weapon, in addition to A.J. Brown, that offense can be lights out. The problem is it wasn't the offense that I think was their biggest detriment last year. So do you throw that first out there, knowing that you're going to be in shootouts, and maybe you put up 30 points a game, but if you're giving up more than that, that's my concern. But I do want to talk about other possible teams. I think you're right, Tyler.
The Rams are going to trade their 2033 pick.
They don't have any picks left.
That's what I said. They're 2033 first-round pick.
You can't trade that far in the future. You can do it like 3 years. No, you can only do it up to 3 seasons ahead. So you cannot just trade 2045. You can't do that. It's illegal. Let's bring in Anthony because he's on the show. It's his birthday. Anthony, besides Tennessee, what are some other possible destinations you think could be good for Julio?
You say besides Tennessee, but that's the only place I could see him going.
Baltimore?
Really?
I've been
Baltimore?
Yeah, honestly. I've been seeing some things about Detroit, but that's not going to happen.
What was your angle just about?
Detroit? There's
They have no one
chance.
to throw to.
There's
They have
no
one to throw
chance
to.
he goes
They've
to
got extra
Detroit.
first-round picks. They've
We
got
have
the
no
collateral.
core receivers at all.
You couldn't offer 47 first-round picks for Julio to go to Detroit, bro.
Julio doesn't have
No,
a choice.
I-
That's
I-
what he
I
does.
was
It's a
saying
no-trade
what-
clause.
He would
It's
retire.
Julio's
Would he?
not going to retire. That's the
I think
Rodgers
he
move.
would.
Julio doesn't
I
have
think it's too old.
Jeopardy waiting in the wings. He doesn't have that kind of leverage.
The Lions wouldn't do that anyway. They're
No,
trying
no,
to
I know.
rebuild for the future. They wouldn't sacrifice picks and draft capital to
I
get a wide
agree.
receiver on an offense that isn't going to compete for the playoffs this year anyway. So you don't have to worry about anything like that.
I just
don't
wanted
think.
Anthony
No.
to say it. I was surprised. I kind of teed him up for that.
If the
I don't
Lions
even
trade
wanna
for a
see that.
receiver, it would be somebody like N'Keal Harry. That, like,
Oh, I agree.
you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
take
That,
a chance on a young guy like that.
Hey,
that,
okay,
that
here's our-
also is garbage.
Here's our segue. N'Keal Harry. So Julio has been quoted as
Yes,
saying
the
that his
Patriots.
his preferred destination is New England.
I was
do we
actually
think-
just going to jump in and say, because he came out and said he really likes Cam Newton, he wants to go to a winning team. You can say what you will about the Patriots without Tom Brady, but they have that winning culture. My thought, while Tyler was so eloquently explaining what the baseline offer would be, and I know Will was like, oh, I mean, if I was Tennessee, I would offer a first, but you have to think of, I guess, what a GM would do. And if I'm Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick, say what you will about a coach, but as a GM, I mean... He's made some pretty bad trades, and the one that comes to mind is giving up a second-round pick for Mohamed Sanu. If you're Bill
To the
Belichick,
same
and
Falcons.
right? Exactly.
To the same
so you're
team.
sitting in your chair, right? And people are flaming you, being like, oh, Brady just won a Super Bowl. Maybe it was all Brady and it wasn't Bill Belichick. And then everyone was making a meme saying, oh, look at the Patriots. During free agency, they're just buying everyone they can. So Bill Belichick very much is aware of saying, we got to surround this team with as much talent that could get separation, that could just do whatever they want. And now you're sitting here in this chair saying, and you see Julio Jones specifically saying, you know what? New England's pretty dope. I don't see, and once again, the way that GMs work, the way they think is completely off from what us fans and analysts kind of think. But my thought is, why wouldn't Bill Belichick be like, all right, I'll give you that second. You want N'Keal Harry? Take him. Yo, you want Sony Michel too? You don't really know how to use him. Take him too. I feel like that's giving up for New England scraps because they went out and got Nelson Aguilar. They got a bunch of different tight ends. They just got
They
so
spent
many people.
$100 million on Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne,
yeah.
and Jonnu Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
And that's why I'm saying, because they spent so much of this money, and, you know, N'Keal Harry is not cutting it out, but he is a young talent. And if
he is a
the
man.
Falcons are looking to get young talent to replace, obviously, Julio, like, it would be great for Atlanta not just to absorb some picks, to also get some players back because they are in that win-now window with Matt Ryan, Calvin really taking the step up, getting Kyle Pitts, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, if I'm Bill Belichick, I would be calling Atlanta right away and be like, all right, we'll give you that second. Do you want N'Keal? Sure, take him. You want Sony? Take him. We don't really want them anyway, but maybe they'll work out for you. All right, good deal. But if the Titans, of course, are calling and be like, oh, yeah, here, take the first, then, I mean, they might be out of the running. But I feel like New England, for some reason, people aren't talking about them enough. But one last thing I wanted to add. I thought it was hilarious that Julio threw a little bit of shade at the end, being like, yeah, I feel like Matt Ryan's kind of losing it on the deep ball. But then he's
Yeah.
like, oh, but Cam Newton's really cool. And I'm just like, well, hold on.
What?
One of
The
your
way that
guys
Cam Newton throws
Yeah.
a ball,
Three
he
times
throws
as
it
many
with like his
touchdowns.
shoulder. It doesn't make sense.
Yep.
But you're saying Matt Ryan lost velocity? But I just joke and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of funny that he kind of put a little nab at the
All
end
dudes
and
lose a
stuff
little
like
on their
that.
deep ball when they get older.
Speaking of quarterbacks who may have issues with throwing the ball, or at least perceived issues, Will, you started mentioning a team I thought could be very sneaky, and that's the Baltimore Ravens.
God knows Lamar needs someone like Julio to complete a pass for sure. Because he is not good.
And they got Rashad Bateman. I mean, that offense would be really well-rounded as long as Lamar took that extra step when it came to passing. If you got Julio, Marquise Brown could just – nobody would be – I mean, he would have a lot of space to run around.
I think he needs to regress. I think he needs to run more. And then just, I think that was the bad thing that they did last year was that he tried to be like something that he wasn't.
But if you don't have those weapons, if you can be a subpar quarterback. You add Julio Jones, a healthy Julio Jones to your mix, and suddenly you're going to be elevated no matter.
I would
if you're
hate
an
him to
NFL
go to Baltimore, honestly, because Baltimore would just be so much more annoying than they already are.
Right.
Like,
Now
think
that's a team
about a team, though. Think about this. when you think about the NFL, right, and your team, whoever your team is, when you have to play the Ravens, you're like, oh, Ravens, like, I don't know if I'm going to win. You know what I mean? Like, there's no other team like that. There's no other team like. I mean,
in the playoffs and stuff. Exactly. I feel you, Tyler.
Like our rivalry has gone back to Eddie George and Ray Lewis playing in the AFC. What was it? AFC North Division. I mean, like, things were nasty with the Ravens and the Titans for years. Now, here's the only thing though: the Ravens. They know I guess I would compare it to the Milwaukee Bucks, which is funny, they're playing a playoff game right now, or it's about over. You know, they play this certain system with Giannis, and nobody can stop him all season long, and then they get to the playoffs, and it's like, oh, that's all you guys do? Oh, okay, we can get in front of Giannis and not let him get layups, and you guys got nothing to do. I see that with Baltimore, where they just run down people's throats with this quarterback run system, and then they get to the playoffs, and, things get ratcheted up, and the schemes get, magnifying glasses on them. And they don't have as much success, and the system doesn't work as well. Lamar Jackson has to find a way to win from the pocket when the playoffs come around, whether he wants to or not. And my question becomes, and I admittedly, even when he won the MVP, I was in the bad. I don't know. Even if he has a Julio and a Bateman, does he have the arm talent and the system to do anything with it?
Right.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, but I feel like I always come into the defense of Baltimore because last year they also lost Marshall Yanda, who is one of the best offensive linemen in the league, and they didn't do much to kind of replace. Exactly, they didn't do much to replace him, and it was very evident, even in the efficiency of the run game, it took a nosedive because they lost Yanda. And then once again, I'm not defending Lamar Jackson, but look at the receivers he had to play. Besides Hollywood Brown, you have Willie Snead, who can't make separation for his life, and Lamar Jackson, maybe not the best thrower out there, but if you're, besides Mark Andrews, of course, also a phenomenal receiver, but if your best receivers is your tight end and Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown, who looks like he's kind of a one-trick pony kind of thing, and Willie Snead, and your offensive line, I'm not saying is decimated, but didn't do much to kind of help him out, and your best kind of offensive weapons, Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, and the Gus Bus. I mean, people are like, oh no, all they do is run. And I'm like, well, that makes sense, but what else would you do if you're this team? You didn't surround it with receivers, so it's unfair to be like, oh, that's all they ever do. I'm like, well, okay, hold on. Let's surround them with some pass catchers, and then we'll see what happens. If they
it's a chicken or the egg.
This isn't your point.
Exactly. Chicken or the egg. Exactly.
This isn't your point, but what a surprise J.K. Dobbins was last year. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the point of what you're talking about, but dude's a stud.
Was that a surprise, though?
Let's wrap it up because J.K. Dobbins, that could be a nice discussion for the flavor of the week when we go into fantasy. And we're all going to see. This Julio thing is fascinating. There's so many fascinating trade scenarios for all these from Rodgers to Wilson. Remember when Russell Wilson wanted to be traded? That feels like 5 years ago. But let's go ahead. We are going to do a Titans deep dive. Keep checking back here. Obviously, we will report on any news that comes out with regards to any potential Julio trade. But we have Tyler from the Locked On Titans podcast on here because we're doing a Titans deep dive. So let's go ahead and jump into that. First, high level, Tyler, what are your thoughts? See, once again, slow on the uptake on the segue music. What are your thoughts on the 2020 season for Tennessee?
Well, for the 2020 season, I have to say, I know that a lot of Titans fans were disappointed with the end of the season. They lose their first playoff game. You were hoping they would make, a little bit of a deeper run. But the reality of the situation here, the Tennessee Titans were a laughingstock for more years than they were not. And for the last 5 years, the Titans have been one of the most, I believe, top 3 winningest teams in the NFL with 4 9-7 seasons and then an 11-5 season with a division championship. That sort of, even though 9-7 isn't pretty, that sort of sustained success is unusual in the NFL. So Titans fans, I think, even me, take a step back for a second, realize that only one team wins every year. A lot of teams are pining for a Super Bowl. So overall, you can't call the 2020 season where the Titans won their first division title in over 10 years and had a home playoff game for the first time in over 10 years. You can't call that a failure by any stretch. But you also have the ability to be critical and look at things through that lens. And obviously the defense was putrid. At this point, it's fair to ask questions about whether or not Mike Vrabel has the chops to lead an NFL defense as a quote-unquote defensive-minded coach, or if he needs to transition into more of a John Harbaugh role, the coach of the Ravens, where he's not an offense or a defensive guy. He has very talented, smart coordinators at both those spots, but he's just a CEO who oversees the team. I think that's the true path for Mike Vrabel forward, because every defense he's ever coordinated, whether it be at Houston or what he's involved with in Tennessee, has been at best average. And I think that's something that you got to take from the 2020 season. On the offensive side of the ball, I think that the Titans, even though they're losing some pieces, which we'll discuss, lost some players, lost Arthur Smith as a play caller, I think the system and the players they have within the system is replicable going forward. So what they need to do is, they know that they have that outside zone run game with Derrick Henry, inside zone duo. They can do all those things in the run game. They know they have the play action bootleg to go off of the run game, and that's their fastball and their changeup from that analogy. But what we do know now is the Titans don't have the curveball. They don't have the slider. They don't have the cut fastball. They don't have that third pitch to go with their fastball and their changeup, because teams had success against the Titans in 2020, getting them in third and long situations by selling out against the run and then blitzing people, putting people at the line of scrimmage. And the Titans didn't have enough people outside of Corey Davis and A.J. Brown who could beat man coverage consistently, and that's ultimately how they got beat when they got beat in most of their games, was that all-out 6 men on the line of scrimmage blitz and not having enough guys open for Ryan Tannehill to get the ball out too. So I'm happy with the 2020 season, as most Titans fans are. Again, division title, home playoff game for the first time in 10 years. But the defense has to improve to at least league average. Whether they can do that under Mike Vrabel, I don't know. And the offense has to develop that third pitch to give them a counter after the heavy run game and the play action game. So that's, I guess, my overall thoughts on the 2020 season. A success, but improvements have to be made if they want to be a real Super Bowl team.
So let's transition to talking about those coordinators. So obviously everybody knows Arthur Smith had a great few seasons running the offense in Tennessee. Now is the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, replaced by Todd Downing, who I believe was coaching the tight ends there in Tennessee, correct? But he's actually been in the league for quite some time. And then Shane Bowen, who had been calling plays, or kind of, even though he wasn't defensive coordinator, was calling plays last season for Tennessee. Right. And Vrabel has now officially made him DC. How are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the coaching situation?
I have to be honest with you. I would call it medium concern at this point. And this is kind of a hot take that is polarizing on Titans Twitter as well. Of course, if any of you guys want to, you can follow me on Twitter at TicTacTitans. Shameless plug. Don't care. There you go. But Todd Downing, I'm not as worried about as the offensive coordinator. He does have play calling experience from his time with the Oakland Raiders in 2017. And he ended up losing that job, and the offense did regress. But looking back on that Raiders roster and the situation, I'm not going to give him a helping of the blame there. Arthur Smith is one of the most gifted minds in the NFL. I'm not going to act like there's no drop-off when he moves to be a head coach somewhere else. But I think his system that he put in place that I mentioned earlier, outside zone run, play action, bootleg, all of that together, I think that he's going to keep that from Arthur Smith, and he learned under Arthur Smith. So I'm not worried about the Titans falling back and regressing in those two areas, the fastball and the changeup, but I'm excited about the prospect of Todd Downing adding that curveball or that changeup or that cutter to this Titans offense, because one thing that, well, not one thing, but some things that Todd Downing focused on when he was the offensive coordinator of the Raiders was isolating matchups, and I think the Titans may have taken some hits to their supporting cast on the offensive side of the ball, but with a guy like Derrick Henry, with a guy like A.J. Brown, even a guy like Darrington Evans, their rookie running back out of Appalachian State from the 2020 draft class, I think the Titans will have the ability to create matchups and focus more on matchups. Last year, they're just, hey, we're running our system, we're running our offense and seeing who's open and seeing what's going. Todd Downing can kind of shift that and get more matchup-based plays, tunnel screens, bubble screens, things like that to A.J. Brown to get the ball in his hands at the line of scrimmage. He isolated tight ends when he was coaching the Raiders as the offensive coordinator. He had Jared Cook Jr. So I think the Titans can use some of that weak side isolation, think shotgun when the tight end's all by himself, they can utilize some things like that to get better matchups out on the field. And when your offensive scheme and your system isn't working 100%, like I talked about the Titans ran into last year, if you can win a one-on-one matchup and get your best players in a advantageous matchup over and over, that's a way to win when nothing else is working that normally does as well. So I'm excited to see Todd Downing use more screen plays, use more RPO action as well that he utilized shortly in Oakland. They were one of the heavy RPO teams in 2017 before that really bursted onto the scene in recent years. So add some RPO elements to the Titans offense, add some matchup elements to the Titans offense. I think all of that could really help diversify the offensive attack for the Titans and take them to the next level on top of what they already had. Shane Bowen at defensive coordinator, though, that's off the rails for me. He proved nothing last year. They basically gave him an internship last year. They didn't give him the defensive coordinator position officially, but they said he was running the defensive meetings. He was calling the defensive plays. He was installing the defensive game plan every week. Well, if he's good enough to do all those things, then why didn't you let him be DC last year? Why didn't you give him the title? And then the Titans have a historically bad pass rush, a historically bad third down defense, and those are the accolades that qualify him to officially now get the title. None of that makes any sense whatsoever. And at this point, it's my opinion that Mike Vrabel's ego is what's getting in the way of him being a good defensive coach and taking the Titans to the next level, because he wants a yes man as his defensive coordinator. There was reports of a rift during the 2019 playoffs where Mike Vrabel was not letting defensive coordinator Dean Pease at the time call defensive plays. He hijacked the defensive play calling during the Chiefs game, and they lost the game. So to me, it's obvious that Mike
Poor guy
Vrabel's
retired
ego,
after that.
Exactly, he retired because he didn't want to deal with it, and the Titans offered him a spot on the coaching or on the staff back this year, and he said, "No, I don't want to work with you guys anymore. I'm going to go be the defensive coordinator for Arthur Smith in Atlanta." So Shane Bowen did nothing to deserve the job, but yet still got the job anyway. To me, that's a clear sign that Mike Vrabel's ego is getting in the way of proper hiring decisions. He wants a yes man as his defensive coordinator who will just shut up and do exactly what he says, and that is going to cause the Titans to have the regression that maybe you mentioned. If that's what turned out, I don't think the Titans will regress massively in any way. I think they're a playoff team and they win the division, but I think if the downfall does come for the Titans, it's because the defense doesn't improve, because Mike Vrabel has hijacked the defense and he's not good enough defensively schematically to be a guy who does that. So that's where I see the coaching hirings right now. And a lot of Titans fans think I'm wrong about Mike Vrabel's ego, but the more that comes out and the more that we know, I think it gets harder and harder and harder to deny that that's a reality in this situation.
Well, I think this year in particular is going to showcase that, and you could end up being proven right. How about, obviously we mentioned they lost some personnel on offense in particular, but how did you feel about how the replacements were? How do you feel about their draft class? You are muted. Is he muted?
Yeah. My button gets a little sticky, so my apologies there.
No worries.
But I think that overall, right now, if the Titans get Julio Jones, obviously it's something that would have to be reassessed, but a grade for the all season, I guess just to sum it up, would be like a B-. In the draft, I really like the Caleb Farley pick. That's a good boom-bust pick for a first-round pick. He's a top 10 talent. Guys like that don't drop into the 20s. So like they did with Jeffrey Simmons off a torn ACL, you take a chance on a high-level talent, and it could pay off like Jeffrey Simmons is paying off. I love Dylan Radins, the offensive tackle out of North Dakota State in the second round. The Titans prioritize the offensive tackle position, so to get another cheap, good rookie on a rookie contract, I think that's important because the Titans' offensive line is kind of expensive with Roger Saffold, Ben Jones, and Taylor Lewan. I do like some of the mid-round picks. I like Elijah Molden as a defensive back, but the reality is the Titans needed another pass catcher, whether that be a tight end or whether that be a wide receiver, and they had pick number 85, and they didn't make a move and go up and secure one of these three names: tight end Tommy Tremble, tight end Hunter Long, or wide receiver Daimi Brown out of North Carolina. They absolutely could not sit on their hands at pick number 85 in the third round and not get one of those best three pass catchers available. They did sit on their hands. They eventually missed out on all three of those guys who got picked at, I believe, believe 81, 82, and 83. And then later on in the draft, in the 4th round, they trade 3 draft picks to move up to pick 109 from 126 and take Des Fitzpatrick, a wide receiver out of Louisville who has some good stuff to his game. But the reality is most pundits had him as a 6th or 7th round draft pick. So to trade up in the 4th round, give 3 of your draft picks up to go up and get somebody who doesn't deserve to be taken that high after what it seems like to me a massive mistake and missing their read and missing out on 3 good pass catchers earlier in the draft. I think that was a little bit of a failure on their end to leave the draft class with only Des Fitzpatrick as the newest addition as a pass catcher. I think that's a complete failure for John Robinson and misreading the draft board and the value of players. But as for the free agent class, I like the addition of Bud Dupree, but it's a risk. You're coming back with him off a torn ACL. The Titans had the 2nd least amount of sacks of any playoff team ever last year. They had 15 sacks going into their last game. It's unacceptable, and to only add a pass rusher off a torn ACL, that's concerning. And Bud Dupree made a lot of his hay with TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt around him. He's not going to have those players in Tennessee. He has to be the main dog, not the 3rd or 4th dog. So can he be that guy to fix the pass rush? They added Danico Autry on the defensive line. I like that. Janoris Jenkins at cornerback to replace Malcolm Butler and Adoree Jackson. I like those moves as well. But right now there's still some big questions at pass catcher, at tight end, and at wide receiver for the Titans. And until they fill those holes, either with like a Golden Tate as a veteran in free agency or a trade for Julio Jones, I think that you can only give it about a B- and be a little skeptical of whether the Titans actually got better this offseason or not.
So your analysis is very thorough of the Titans, and I love it. I had various questions I was going to ask, and you're just covering all of them. So we're just going to jump to the end with all that you've said. Let's hear some predictions for 2021 for Tennessee.
Well, my apologies there. I guess I can work on being a little more conversational.
No, it's great. I don't have to ask questions. You just flow right through.
Talk to yourself for 30 minutes a day, you kind of just get used to rattling off every single talking point that you have. But predictions, I think the Titans go 10-7. I think that they still win the AFC South with a 10-7 record. However, I think the division won't have any hard hitters. I could see the Colts going 9-8 or 8-9. I think Jacksonville will be a little better than last year, about 5-12 or 6-11. I think the Texans will be absolutely abysmal. They might not win a dumpster fire. Yeah, depending on whether Deshaun Watson can carry them to about 4 or 5 wins on his own, like he did last year. But I think that if he doesn't play, which right now it seems like he may not due to the legal troubles, they're not going to win a game with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. So I think the division will be less than average, and I think the Titans can win with 10-7. But I do think the offense will regress in terms of explosiveness, but the defense will not be so putrid. You'll get kind of an average team, but I think the Titans could ultimately maybe go further in the playoffs than they did last year with that kind of regression with offense and defense. But I have them 10-7, winning the division. I ultimately think that they lose in their first game or their second game of the playoffs, though I don't think that they're a Super Bowl team right now. Again, with a Julio Jones trade, though, that would change my calculation. So maybe if something like that happens closer to the season, we can talk again. But right now, I'd say 10-7, a division title, and an early playoff loss.
Yeah, if we get Julio on the Titans, we will absolutely bring you back on. Tyler, thank you so much. You've said it all. You clearly know your Titans. Make sure to check out the Locked On Titans podcast if you want to hear more Tyler Titans rants. Which will definitely absolutely have you on the show again. Tommy from the You Dive Deep, thank you so much. Tommy's going to stick around for the flavor of the week. Anthony, happy birthday. Thanks for Anthony's ankle. As we mentioned, we're going to do a fantasy preview show for the flavor of the week, so make sure to stick around for that. Please subscribe, tell all your friends, that keep leaving us those 5-star reviews on iTunes. Check us out on Twitter at @OfficialPPPod. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Check out our Discord community with the link in the episode description. And as I mentioned, stick around for the flavor of the week. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Pigskin Party Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort. We'll catch you in the next Pigskin Party.